On this week's episode of Vets and Real Estate Podcast, we're going to be joined by John Galindo, former Sergeant Major in the Army, now turned commercial real estate pro. So stay tuned. All right, well, welcome to the episode. This week we're joined by John Galindo. John, welcome so much to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate that, Will. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess elephant in the room, make sure the intro didn't say you were Sergeant Major of the Army. You're Sergeant Major in the Army. Make sure we make that one clear in case I fumbled my words.
That's correct.
Right? No stolen valor on this podcast. So let's talk about your time when you were a Sergeant Major in the Army.
Yeah.
What did you do?
So I started off my career as a 31 Romeo. They no longer have that in the Army. They reclassed that to 25. But I was a combo guy.
Okay.
Got a little bored with that, and then switched over to the Special Ops world, where I was a 38 Bravo for the majority of my career.
Okay, that's PsyOps, right? Or civil affairs, correct? Yeah.
Civil
Okay.
affairs, right.
So obviously you spent career in the Army. Was like real estate just itching the entire time? You're like, as a young PFC, you're like, man, I want to be a realtor. I want to get out there and sell real estate. I want to do something. Or was this kind of a later in career? You're like, oh God, I'm getting out. What do I do?
It was literally like a spur of the moment type deal. I already kind of knew that I was going to have to get out due to a medical issue. So I was just kind of figuring out how long that was going to take. And in that time, I was making calls, trying to figure out what I was going to do when I grow up, as they all say. And then a buddy of mine who had retired probably about a year before maybe 2 years before, he was doing some real estate stuff on the side, throughout his career.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to him about it. He was just like, have you ever looked into CCIM? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that is. And, nothing came of it. And a couple months later, I just woke up January 1st and was like, let me look up this CCIM. I looked it up and applied and started my first course, and that's just how it started.
Huh. So that's funny. So my journey as well, I had an old warrant who was like, I'm doing real estate investing. And I was like, okay, cool. And I'd already had some other, introductions to all that. And he was kind of the catalyst too. He's like, you should get into real estate. And so kind of funny that it tends to be a trend that it's usually somebody else who's maybe a little further along in the journey, kind of throw it out to us. And then we're like, hey. So what was it about CCIM? And I guess, CCIM is...
Certified Commercial Investment Member?
There you go.
Yeah,
So you're quizzing you a little bit, right? I guess you're going to be the soon-to-be chapter president, right?
That's correct.
No quizzes on you, right? And ideally, that's kind of like the PhD of commercial real estate. So going out there and really understanding just how deals go together. Did you know you wanted to do commercial from the very beginning? Did you think about selling houses or being an appraiser or all the other things you could do? At
first, when I first initially started thinking about real estate, it was homes. And, how many homes can I get and rent them? That stuff, that route. And then I got to a point where I was like, man, I have to have all these homes, probably multiple property management companies to help with all that. And I was like, maybe I just own one building. Like maybe that's the case. And then that's when I made the call to a friend of mine who had just retired. I was telling him that same story, and he was just like, look into CCIM. Like, everyone I know that has that designation is well off. They're doing well. So that's how it started. CI 101 was my first real estate course to ever take. No deals, no nothing. That was my very first one.
So for those that don't know, what does CI 101 cover?
A lot of hard numbers. That's what it covers. It's probably one of the hardest courses out of the four, and I was doing that in the morning at 5 in the morning before I was going to work on my own, trying to figure it all out, and got through that about a month, 2 months, and passed the exam and did well, and I was like, oh, I can do this.
Okay.
And that's kind of just it started the training and continuing on the main courses. So.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that's interesting. I knew that was part of your journey. I didn't realize you were up at 5 a.m. working on CCI. I got to have a cup of coffee or two before I start doing math, so I can only imagine. It's talking about time, value of money, and accumulated cash flow, and all those kind of fun things in that course. That early in the morning has got to be a little interesting.
Well, so I'm a morning person anyway, so I feel like that's my strongest time of the day is those first few hours of the morning. So that's what really helped, and. And once you start playing with the calculators that they provide you, and you're like, oh, this is cool. And, it went from there.
So you started that while you were still in service.
Correct.
And I mean, were you paying for that out of pocket? Were you able to
Correct.
use kind of tuition reimbursement or?
So the funny thing is, at first, this was January of 2020. And so I did that one just out of the blue. Woke up, like I said, and then once I passed that one and started 102, that's when COVID hit. So everyone was home already anyway. And I was trying to do that. I was trying to use my benefits and stuff, but the way the system's set up, you couldn't use none of your benefits to help pay unless you were going to Chicago to take the courses.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't until later, where after months of COVID, that they changed it temporarily. And then for, I believe, 104, CI 104, and maybe ethics, I was able to use my benefits to help pay for that.
Okay. So there are opportunities to do it. It was just, I guess when you were in, it was a little, I guess, regimented because of the actual physical location you had to be in.
Correct. And then now they changed it back, so it's back to the old terms where if I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it went back to the original ways where you can only use your benefits if you go to Chicago.
Gotcha.
And use it at the institution.
Okay, maybe that's we need to get CCIM on here to talk through all that as well, because I can imagine it changes between CCIM's policies and then what the VA and what the DoD is allowed to do. I can imagine that changes rather quickly and maybe for the better and probably for the worse sometimes too.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
So you're taking your classes, then what? So you're still not out of the Army.
No, so I've taken a few, and at the time my wife's pregnant with our son. And we have a newborn, pretty much. So things were a little hectic at the house,
Sure.
but of course my wife did a great job on keeping the baby while I focus on these classes during the day.
That's right. You're in public. You got to make sure you tell your wife she did an amazing job, right?
Yeah, awesome job on her.
We'll clip this part specifically so we can send it to her.
Yeah, and I can show her that one.
Right.
But as that goes through, towards the end, I was kind of figuring out what is I'm doing all this coursework stuff. Like, what is it like being in an office? Like, what's this day-to-day looking like? And then, of course, I'm following advice on LinkedIn. I'm like, who am I reaching out to? Like, how do I network with people and stuff like that? So something that I did hear from, I can't remember the guy's name, but was like, reach out to people who you have some type of commonality with, right? If you're a veteran, reach out to veterans. So, of course, LinkedIn search, veterans, commercial real estate, the one and only Will Curtis pulls up, right? And a few others, but I mean, you were the one that actually responded back, and we talked on the phone, and I kind of let you know what I was looking to do, and I didn't know it at the time, but a lot of the internships for that summer had been canceled out, right? And that's why you connected me with Bethany Babcock, and of course, made the calls to her, and then one thing just led to another, and I mean, ended up getting hired by them and taking their program that they created.
Yeah, so walk through, because I know Bethany, and part of her passion is really kind of training that next generation. Like, that's really kind of her passion.
Correct.
I know that at least from what I understand, the internship was really born out of the fact that COVID happened and students couldn't get the internship, so she wanted to give some type of training. So because you were the second class?
I was the second class, correct.
That went through. So walk through what Bethany and Foresite have kind of put together for that class.
Oh man, I don't know if I'll do it justice, today, but I mean it's grown significantly, and they cover pretty much anything within commercial real estate. They go over property management. They go over some site selection stuff. They go over investment sales, things like that. So it's grown a lot, even from when I've taken the course and to the one that we've just completed this past summer, where now they're getting additional locations where they're dialing in from out of state.
Right.
And they have even new instructors coming in who I think this past summer they had a gentleman coming from Dallas who focuses on small strip centers, and he came in and gave a class and a course on what he looks at and what to look for, things like that. So I mean, they have everything from title, lawyers. I mean, they cover everything. So
Yeah,
it's awesome.
That's awesome, and I think you may agree, especially if you kind of look at the landscape. there's not a lot of commercial brokers that do that kind of training.
Exactly.
It kind of is I want to say the luck of the draw, but sometimes it really can be the luck of the draw. It's like, oh, congratulations, John, you're hired. We're going to partner you with Joe over here. And if Joe is a great mentor, you're going to have a great career.
Correct.
If Joe is a terrible mentor,
it's rough.
We'll
Yeah.
you know, if you make it 6 months, great. But if not, your rollout rate, your washout rate's probably relatively high. Where,
Right.
you know, I think Bethany is kind of taking a little bit of a different approach.
Mm-hmm. No, it works out great. They have students who come who've been in the business maybe for a couple of years, and they still go through it and, you know, say, hey man, I've learned so much, you know, because I mean, luckily for me, I was able to do that in my route to being hired at Foresite, which I think I'm the first one, you know, and the only one.
Right.
But I think it helps alleviate that piece to where, you know, you can go into another brokerage now having some knowledge of looking at leases and letters of intent and doing some market reports and things like that, where that's a big learning curve once you get there.
Yeah.
You
I
know.
mean, your real estate license doesn't cover any of this.
Correct. Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
It's completely different.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you look at most real estate licenses, it's like, here's what you do with a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And it doesn't jump into what does a triple net really mean and how do you do a CAM reconciliation and all those aspects that really go into it, right?
Yeah.
So you went through the internship, you got hired, then what?
So, kind of one step back is I started that internship and I was doing the homework, all that good stuff, and it was weeks into it where I was still having that, like, I still haven't been to an office. I still haven't gotten the feel of, like, the personalities or, you know, what is that case? So then, you know, I just messaged Bethany one day and was like, can I just come to the office in San Antonio? Like, I'm not far from here. And they're like, yeah, show up on Tuesdays. We have our deal meetings on Tuesdays. I was like, all right. So I show up early on Tuesday. Like, they have a cousin that lives here, so I stayed overnight. And then visited, hung out with them all day. And at the end of the day, I was like, I can do this. Like, I feel like I can do this. Like, you know, and everyone was super nice and cool. And so I leave that day, and that was a Tuesday. That Sunday, they posted on LinkedIn that they were hiring. So I was like, I'm just gonna apply.
You're like, goodbye.
Let me apply. So I applied, and then that Monday at 9 o'clock, like 9 a.m. sharp, they called and was like, "You're hired. When can you start?"
No interview, no nothing. They were just
we
like,
liked you, and you know, you got to meet everybody in the office. We like the personality, your vibe, and all that. So when can you start? You know, so. It was just as soon as I can get a house and my wife's gonna get a birth here soon, and you know, once we can get through that,
kind of got to get out of the army and
Yeah.
take care of a baby. Yeah.
So it was probably at that time it was probably September timeframe.
Okay.
And that January is when we moved in December, and I started January.
Gotcha.
2021.
So then what did that first, you know, January 2021, what did that look like? I mean, we're still kind of COVID, at least with Foresite. You guys are doing a lot of retail, and retail was kind of an interesting point in the market there, but there's still deals happening for the most part, right?
Yeah, I felt like still deals were happening. Of course, being you, I was just trying to absorb as much as possible. How we do it at Foresite was, you know, I was brand new, so they assigned me to Zach Parra, who's been with Foresite probably the longest out of everybody, and it was kind of just like a year-long mentorships. So I went to like as many meetings as I could that he went to, tours. You know, because then you get to see that too, where you're actually walking into shell spaces, and
right.
you know, you can hear him talk through what this is and where that is, and that's the water, and that's the sprinkler system. You know, because that's some stuff that I've never paid attention to. So, and just work through that as far. You know, I was doing a lot of calls at first, just trying to build up a list, meet people, things like that, and then after a bit, then they felt comfortable enough where I was doing kind of tours on my own, stuff like that. So it was good.
So how was that first deal then? You're cold calling, you're prospecting, you're whatever, and finally like, yeah, we want to work with you. Like, what does that feel like?
It was cool because luckily for me, and this is the coolest thing ever, and it just worked out the way it is as a veteran, 20-year veteran Army, my first 3 out of 4 deals were veterans.
That's cool.
You know, it was super cool. You know, so I did a tattoo shop where one was a Army and one was a Marine, so 2 partners.
Okay.
And you know, not big deals, but it's super cool because you come around them, you start talking, it's different. It's different. Conversations a lot easier. Things just seem a lot easier to explain. and then I did a restaurant. But they're still open too. I go visit them all the time in Helotes, called 6 Clicks. But yeah, it was just. I was lucky. 3 of my first 4 deals ever were veterans, so it was cool.
Yeah, that is awesome. So have you found that your business generally gravitates towards veterans, or is it kind of you get lucky when you meet them, or?
Yeah, I think I was just lucky when I meet them.
Okay.
It just happens. Or I can, you and any other veteran listening, is when you're making a call or you're talking to somebody over the phone and they say certain words, I'm always like, were you in the Army, or are you a veteran? Because they might say certain things and you're like, not too many people say that.
Right. It would behoove you to listen. Oh shit,
who are you? Roger that.
Right,
Yeah. It's just certain things you're like,
Yeah, that's funny. I never thought about it, but that's exactly true. I know it's kind of interesting as we talk to like the residential agents that have come through. Like many of them are used to the PCS and they're used to that lifestyle, so a lot of them will gravitate back towards military veterans. Where I think in commercial that might be a little more difficult. And I know even in my business, I'm in part of those veteranpreneur groups and trying to do it, but. I mean, it's 1,000 people, and you probably got 15, 20 legit businesses, and everybody else has got a side hustle they're running off the couch. And I mean, it's got to start somewhere. And I don't want to discredit it, but it's like for the business you and I are doing, it's kind of hard to find some of those. Have you found a way that you're finding them, or is it just kind of simply on calls? And
yes, I think nowadays it's just more of either referrals or just word of mouth, or just. Since I've kind of been in the real estate game for a little bit and not long, but it's enough to where it's just drawn up business that way. Or like I said, even if they're not interested at the time, if I get them on a call or whatever, it's a lot easier for them to stay in contact when I'm like, oh, were you in the Army? Or why you say Roger? Right. Not too many people say that. I'm like, oh yeah, and that helps form a bond. And I've had some come back later and like, hey man, you remember me? Like. I'm ready now. I'm ready now, so.
Okay.
It's been good.
So we've talked about what you did right, and it sounds like you did quite a few things right. You were proactive, you found the right people, you connected, you networked, you got the right internship, you put yourself out there to go and meet the Foresite crew early on to where you didn't even have to interview. It sounds like you did a lot of things right. Let's talk about the fun thing is like, what if you were to go back and talk to John in 2020 as you're starting to make this transition, what would you have been like, dude, don't do this again?
Oh man,
you're like, where do I start?
yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's anything where I would say I wouldn't do again, because I feel like that kind of just builds on where I'm at today.
Done everything right.
No, I mean, I definitely had done everything.
So
right.
What did you learn then? What were some of those things that you were like, man, I'm glad that sucked, so I could learn that lesson.
So as far as deals,
or just in general, as you've made that transition.
If I could start over again, I would probably focus more on time management, because I think when you first start, you're so quick to you don't want to drop nothing, you don't want to take someone's. I mean, we pride ourselves on making calls back and getting back in time with people, but I was really bad at if someone called in, I was so excited because they were like, hey, I want to look at that space, and I wasn't.
Weren't vetting.
I wasn't vetting them properly, so I'm like, I'll see you over there. Can you go right now? And like, yeah, I can be there in 10 minutes. All right, cool. I'm on my way, and I'm packing my stuff. So I'm driving down 1604, taking me 30 minutes to get there. It's 3:00 in the afternoon already. They not being qualified, and so I did that for a long time where I wasted a lot of time on that piece. And I think that's a hard lesson to learn, but that's a very good lesson to learn that I really remember now. Because I'm like, nah, because now if the conversation goes a certain way, you're like, okay, red flag.
Right.
And you start asking more questions and kind of digging into that before I even leave the office.
Yeah, so that's fair. That's good.
I think that's my biggest one.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had this conversation elsewhere where I turn around and do the same thing after 15 years of doing this. I got all excited. All right, let's go do it. You need a short-term lease? All right, we'll do short-term. Yeah. Thinking 3 years, 2 years, something like that. I was like, this will work. And he's like, I need 2 months. I'm like, dadgummit. Off your game, you forget it. But it's a good reminder that absolutely you gotta qualify those folks.
Yeah, you have to. And I was real bad at it. And luckily, we have a senior broker come over a few years ago, and he would always get on me, and I liked that about him, because that's what I was used to in the Army, where people were just up straight, like you're messing up, you're wasting your time, like you're not making money that way, like focus on your time. Your time is the money, you know, so don't be wasting it driving if you don't need to go drive. Like you need to vet them, make sure it's worth that time. And once I started, it took him many times. It was like my first time in at basic training when I was calling the drill sergeant, sir, ma'am, you know, I was getting in trouble a lot. So it took a couple of times for that to happen.
Sure.
They finally sat in right, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, but these are the lessons, especially why I wanted to put the podcast together, right? These are the things that we got to learn. And you know, you say it was beneficial to go through it. I had the same struggle, right? I still have the same struggle from sometimes, right? But these are the things that are valuable that, you know, somebody coming in may not have thought about that, and maybe they learn a little bit from your experience, right? That's ultimately why we want to put this stuff together is, I mean, if we can learn from each other's experience, maybe we learn the lesson. You're like, oh yeah, that's right. That's the thing that John guy was talking about, the Sergeant Major of the Army, right? You know, that's that thing that John guy was talking about that one time. Was like, I gotta qualify. I'm like, I can't do this again. You know, and I mean, I think it's one of the beautiful things about the military is we generally look back and learn from each other's mistakes. We see what somebody did right. We use those after action reports.
Right. Yeah.
And kind of doing the same thing, just now looking at people's careers.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and it's kind of going back to like your after action reviews. You know, it's starting to try to implement that too after certain deals where you're like, okay, what went right about this deal? What went wrong about this deal? What can I do better next time? You know, or what did I miss? Things like that. So you can sit back and look at some of that stuff too. That helps.
Sure.
You know,
you started CCIM pretty quick. I mean, before you were in the industry, right? Your first real estate class was literally CI 101, which it could be referred to as a weeder class, that if you're interested in commercial, you take that class, you're like, yep, nope, not going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what was that journey through, I guess, through CCIM, earning your designation? Like, what was that been like?
It's been great. If I had the time, I would do all the courses again. Just because like the way I did it, you know, you got to take all those courses, and everyone kind of knows you have to have that portfolio before you can even take the final exam. So it was a couple of years in between.
Sure.
So like the CCR, the review of everything was pretty difficult for me. I had to study a lot in order to feel confident in the exam. But for me, a good reason why I really wanted to finish it out was, one, I've already invested all that money in myself, in education, and I wanted to finish it. But two, like you were saying earlier, it's, you know, the PhD, or, you know, the top of commercial real estate in a lot of people's eyes, and I wanted to have that. I wanted to earn it, and honestly, being that new into the business, I felt it would just having that on my name would be enough for people to call you back and email you back, because that wasn't happening a whole lot.
Sure.
First year or two in my career, you know, in real estate. So, but it's very difficult to get people to call you back.
No, I would agree. And I mean, my journey was similar. I think as soon as I graduated, I was like, let's start working on it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Because it's that same struggle, right? You know, competing against folks that look like they've been doing it, they may not, but their second career, they've been doing it a whole lot longer. They're a bit gray-headed. They look like they know what they're doing, where I'm still pretty lean and fit and not as chubby as I am now, but, you know, I looked young. And I'm sure you kind of had that same struggle as well. I mean, you still look young, you know, in that sense, right? So I can see that same struggle is there. Do you think getting involved in the chapter any?
No, it has definitely, because I mean, once again, thanks to you, where you kind of threw me in there, right?
Here's the hardest committee, jump on.
Yeah, but I feel like it's just opened a whole lot of doors for me as far as just building relationships. I think it's got me in front of a lot of people that I haven't gotten in front of, you know, a lot sooner. But also because they maybe focus on something else like office or medical or something that I don't do. So, but it just gets you in front of people easier and faster, and that's kind of helped me kind of with the networking and just kind of getting me out of my comfort zone too. So I think going the CCIM route and participating in the chapter and doing the luncheons and things like that has been great. It's been great for me.
Yeah, and I would echo, you know, that's been kind of my journey as well, right? You've then decided to move up into into leadership, and I mean, I would imagine that's kind of natural. You were a sergeant major while you were in the Army. You were obviously a leader of soldiers. So have you found, I guess, that military leadership?
Mm-hmm.
Have you found that's an advantage, a disadvantage? There's a learning curve as you've kind of transitioned out of there. I mean, it's a whole lot different from, they don't listen, you yell at them to go do push-ups, right? You can't do that in the civilian world. It took me a couple of years to figure that out. I mean, how's leadership, I guess, kind of changed from, just 4 years ago, you were sergeant major, you were top dog, to, you're starting a new career and leading an organization that you're still, relatively, young in.
Right. Well, I mean, so the transition from the Army into, the positions I had in the military and coming in here were, it doesn't matter, right? So that was kind of hard, right? Because I was like, I can take no for an answer, like that's not a problem. But when you take a lot of no's, it's actually a transition. Like, how does people not call me back?
Right? You know who I am?
It's like,
Sergeant Major
just
Galindo.
like any service member that's ever been in more than a year knows that if you got a call from somebody, you're calling them back, especially if they're in command or something. So that wasn't happening, but got used to that, moved on, and but yeah, as far as like leadership roles, it is a little different. It is a little different. You just got to figure out kind of ways of coming back to accountability. I think if there's nicer ways to say, are you sure you want to take care of this? Can you handle it? Things like that. So it's a little different, but it feels more at home being in some of those leadership positions, because it kind of feel like I've been to something like that before. I've
Sure, it's just a different.
It's just the different personalities, and just knowing that it's people can just walk out if they want. They can just be like, whatever.
and I've always been curious of that, because I made it to Sergeant E5. I was promoted for 6, but at that point, I was getting out, so it didn't matter. And I know, at least when I was in one of the discussions, was always that as a staff sergeant or sergeant E5, E6, your leadership is very different. By the time you go to, I guess, not called BNOC anymore, what do they change it there to basic leaders course and advanced leaders course and whatever it's all been, right?
Now it's like Warriors leaders course now.
I can't keep up with all of it. But as you go through those additional NCO professional development courses, at least my vision, or at least what they was explained to me, was you learn how to lead differently as you go through those leadership courses. You went to Sergeant Major Academy. I would imagine that prepared you, but is that really the case? Did you, as you've progressed in the military, was those leadership traits or the leadership skills they taught you, do you think they transferred better? Whereas I know for me as a frontline leader, it was yell louder and show them what to do.
Right. I think so. Because like you're saying, when you're a corporal or a E5, you go to your first one. It was PODC when I was. Back in the day. Just like 10 years ago, not so long. But yeah, it varies, because as you move up, you kind of start seeing it from, here at one level, and then another level, and that view point of it gets wider as you move up in ranks. So yeah, I think it transfers. A lot of it can transfer over. It just depends on, I guess, personalities that are all in there. Luckily, I feel in the civil affairs world is, since they go through an assessment and you pretty much kind of pick anyone that comes into that MOS. I've been lucky with leadership, and I've been lucky with soldiers where, they understand. Of course you still have your few bad apples, everyone does, but majority, are on par. They understand. Without guidance, they know they have to get it done. They know timelines. Good soldiers. So I haven't had that problem, with the board. I feel like everyone's get stuff done.
All self-driven.
Yeah. I
know the fun thing that I've learned is it's a lot of Type A personalities, and the military is that way too. I think that's fair, but I don't know. It is a little different with the personalities.
It's different. So that's something I struggle with at first, because I feel like I 100% agree with that. Is there's the people making money and doing deals or pushing. I feel like more on that top Type A personality traits. Same in the Army, when competitive, special ops world, like everyone's like that. The difference I felt were, in the military, if you felt like someone was, being disrespectful or talk to you a certain way, you could just go up and like, Will, like, what the heck's your problem, man? In a more, I guess, type A personality way, I guess.
Yeah.
And you couldn't really do that,
It's called assault in the civilian world.
Right? So there's plenty of times if you ever, get coffee with Bethany one of these days, you can ask her. She's talked me off the ledge a couple of times. She's like, don't go do that. Like, just take a breath, So shout out to Bethany for that. She's talked me off a couple of ledges. We're like, no, you just take this in consideration. And like, oh, okay, I got it. Yeah. It's just a different ways to handle things. So
yeah. I think these are good stories, right? Because I mean, we're chuckling because we both understand exactly what it is, but it's a difference. And I don't know, if I were to look back at the Will getting out, I'm sure same thing. If you're looking at the John that was getting out, like there's no way that I thought the situation I would have been in, or those kind of things would have been there. I don't know if there's any way to really prepare for that.
No, I don't think so.
I mean,
I don't think so.
You got transition assistance. You've got all those things that are there as well. But I mean, I don't know about you. The guy that taught my transition assistance class was a retired sergeant major who literally his first job after getting out was to come back and teach how to do transitioning into a civilian job. And I was like, you haven't even had a civilian job. Like, not trying to be disrespectful. Right. A good instructor. You did good work, but I don't know. They don't prepare you. And again, I understand a lot of that's changed. Right. And I guess what I went through and what you've gone through has probably changed a little bit as well. There's, 10 years or so difference between I got out and you got out. But I mean, was there anything from that program that you can recall that really you took and ran with?
I think they've made a lot of adjustments over the years. I mean, even probably more now that I've been out almost 4 years. But it's not as I mean, they have a lot of, like, say, programs and things like that. I think that's an excellent thing. But I think there's still some that they can't prepare you for. And I feel like this is a good example where, you can come out E9, 20 years in the Army, 26, and, however long you served, in positions of leadership, and, you have 135 people under you, however many, right, to... you come in a commercial real estate.
You're the low guy.
Like, no one cares who you are. Like, you're starting out for private again. And for those who've been in or served in the service, like when you're private, you weren't talking to the first sergeant, you weren't talking to the commander, you weren't talking to the battalion commander, none of that. Right? You were talking to your first line, and that was it.
Yeah.
So that kind of like that same feeling coming over, where you're trying to call these other agents and brokers, and they're like, "Who are you?" Like, nah, later. Or it takes you 3 or 4 days to get a phone call back. So
right.
It kind of just brings you back to that, where you're like, you just got to build it up over time. So.
But it at least in my perspective, when you're in the military, it feels like it takes forever to get there. Like, I mean, obviously you come in as an E1, you promote in 6 months, and you promote in another 6 months. Like, I mean, you can make it a specialist, within or E4 in a couple of years.
Correct.
And then, you can go E5, E6 pretty quickly, depending on your career field. But then when you start getting to 6 to 7 to 8, like, you're in these positions for a long time. Yeah. In commercial real estate, I don't know if it feels that same way.
So I think like say, I have, and a few others I know. I mean, there's many that have done it, but you can make E5 in 3 years. Yeah. But I feel like when you go back, it's a lot of stuff very similar, right? That first year or two is gonna hurt. Because you're the bottom man, you're doing, if you're going out to the field, you're digging the foxholes, you're running the Constantine wire, like you're doing all the hard work, and I feel like that's kind of just like how it is in commercial real estate. You're doing all the calls, the emails, all that hard stuff, and then over time it's just word of mouth. Once you get one deal done with one agent, they're like, oh yeah, have you talked to Will? Like, I don't know, Will, I did this deal with him.
Yeah, that guy's legit. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you do another deal with someone else, and you start kind of building some of that confidence where like they're gonna answer your phone calls a lot faster, because they know that you either it's one of two things, like you either bringing them something they want to deal with, and they're not gonna answer your call, or you're like, hey, I've done this deal with him, he's gotten a few clients, like he's worth my time, he's gonna answer they'll answer the call.
Yeah.
Or you start building, on the other hand too, is you start building confidence and trust with the agents and brokers that you work for. So where they're like, hey, we're gonna we like your progress. Here's this landlord listing. You know, help us with this one.
Yeah.
Take lead on that. And, you know, one step here, you're doing good on there. Here's another one. You're doing good on there. Here's another one. So I feel it's the same. You know, when you're private, it's the same. Like you work hard for your first line. They're gonna vouch for you when, you know,
fair, yeah.
when their staff starts like, hey, we got to send one person to airsoft school. Who we sending? I'm sending private Galindo.
Yeah.
You know, and this is why. And
Fair.
so as long as you're working hard, people see it, and it just grows and grows and grows.
Okay.
So.
Last question for you. If you were going to have that conversation, somebody was in your same shoes, getting out after 20 plus years of the military, and it's like, John, I want to go into commercial real estate. What would you tell them to do?
Oh, I mean, I'd tell them to try it. Try it. Like, why not? You know, because here's the true story. I gave myself a year.
Okay.
Because I knew I've invested all this money in myself, you know, and I knew it was gonna be hard. And it's commission only, like, you know, so you have that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it my all for a year, and at the end of the year, do an assessment. And then, even though that year was rough, you know, I felt like, okay, I feel like I'm moving forward. I'm gonna do one more year. Second year.
It's almost like you're re-upping
and
year after year.
Re-upping, right? So that's exactly what I was gonna get at. So I was coming back, and then after that year too, I was like, okay, I'm in it now. Like I'm in it now. Cause like when I joined the Army, I didn't plan on it. It wasn't a career for me. Like I was getting out of West Texas. I didn't want to go to do the oil field.
Right.
You know, I was like, man, I want to do something different. So I joined. I only planned on doing 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing you know, I'm re-upping. I'm going to Fort Bragg to jump out of airplanes, and then a couple years later, I'm re-upping again. And next thing you know, I'm in def and I'm career soldier. So I tell people, you know it's a grind. Know it's going to be, you know, nothing's really going to be given to you. You got to go out there and work for it, and you just never know. If it hits and it clicks for you, and you want to keep running for it, I mean, the sky's the limit. Yeah. So give it a year.
Just give it a year.
Give it a year.
I like it. Just give it a year. It sticks around and works. So.
Because if you're just a foot further than what you might be like, that's worth it. I've made a lot of progress, and you can continue on. So
yeah, that's fair. That's great advice. Just give it a year, and if you like it, keep going. Give it another year from there. Eventually, you'll be in def, and you'll be there. Right?
You know, I think you get to a point where you're like, I have enough business. I got a pipeline, and you're just like, why turn back now?
Yeah, the hard work's been done.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but all right. Well, thank you so much, John. That's going to conclude our episode here. But great information, great story, and I absolutely appreciate the time. And I'm sure we'll get some questions inside the chats and social medias and all that kind of stuff. So we may tag you in to answer some of those questions or bring you back with big old long FAQ that everyone wants to know how you were sergeant major of the Army, rather in the Army. That one, right? So appreciate it. Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Will. Thank you.